spectacle, and to have gone to the Tower of Maecenas and recited the fall of Troy. The tradition is that Nero was fiddling while Rome burned.
His actions after the blaze were just as incriminating. Nero confiscated a third of the charred city as his own personal property and set out to build the empire's most extravagant monument to self-indulgence, a palace complex covering some 200 acres of downtown Rome.
The rumor starts to spread that he had set the fire intentionally so as to clear a portion of the city where he could build this palace.
Nero blamed the fire on a new religious cult called the Christians and had hundreds of them strung up and burned to death in the streets of Rome. This was just the latest in a string of horrifying acts that solidified Nero's dysfunctional legacy.
He served up the head of one of his ex-wives to his new wife as a present on her request, and then later kicked her to death when she was pregnant in a fit of rage. Most of the acts for which Nero is most infamous come after one of the most heinous acts one can commit, the killing of one's own mother.
Agrippina, who had orchestrated Nero's rise to power by killing her husband Claudius, was Antiquity's most overbearing mother. She expected to share power equally with her son.
She wasn't going to accept a subservient role, not to Claudius, not to her son, and that, of course, did her in, ultimately.
Agrippina's thirst for control gradually infuriated Nero. In 59 AD, 5 years after he became emperor, the 21-year-old sent his guards to kill his own mother. As they closed in, Agrippina symbolically ordered the guards to stab her in the womb.
She said, "Strike here first." This bore Nero. Very dramatic.
Nero was haunted by visions of his mother's ghost for the rest of his life. Visions which pushed him further into madness.
Nero, as time goes on, becomes more and more lonely, and at the same time, perhaps also therefore more and more paranoid and more cruel.
It was in the midst of his deepening delusions that Nero began building the empire's most lavish pleasure palace on public land and with public money.
You'd have to imagine the whole of Central Park is transformed into Bill Gates' personal estate and pleasure palace. And this is in the heart of the city where the rich and the affluent and the people who have a part of the city itself once had their homes. It was shocking.
Nero bled the provinces dry to get money for that. And also in Rome, he demanded money from the rich. They had to bequeath him their money, and then they would be offed. It must have been a very scary time to be alive.
Nero's golden house was built on the pain and sweat of forced labor. In ancient Rome, slavery was a common and acceptable practice. 1 in every 3 people living in the city was a slave.
Rome's achievements would be unthinkable without slave labor. This slave labor was part of what generated the profits necessary to maintain and to expand an empire. There's no question that slave labor was also very significant for the building of these grand projects that really define the essence of imperial Rome.
Nero's new palace would reflect his godlike perception of himself. It was designed to evoke a sprawling seaside villa in the heart of the city. Vineyards, gardens, and pastures for wild animals would cover what had once been Rome's downtown crossroads. The center of the complex would be a man-made lake, and the pavilion with covered walkways a mile long. A vast 150-room wing of that pavilion still survives today buried beneath modern Rome. Its cavernous interior demonstrates Roman mastery of another engineering innovation: the vaulted ceiling.
A vault is nothing more or less than an arch which has been extended along an axis. Once you've built that framing one time and built one arch, move the framing, build another, move the framing, build another, you have a long vault. Very efficient way to build for the Romans.
When the Domus Aurea was completed after just 4 years, Emperor Nero exclaimed, "Finally, I can begin to live in a house worthy of a human being." The surviving remnant is a dank shell of the decadent palace he inhabited. These brick and concrete chambers were once trimmed in gold and covered with colorful frescoes and priceless gems.
There were semi-precious and precious stones embedded in the ceiling, so that there's lapis lazuli and rock crystal and rose crystal that were just put up to catch the light.
And in building the Domus Aurea, Nero is showing that he is not, like good emperors, generous with his personal resources, and I think this is one of the things that leads to his downfall. His behavior was so far off the scale in terms of what senators and people in Rome expected out of their emperor that I think he ultimately paid the price.
In 68 AD, just months after he moved into the Domus Aurea, Nero was overthrown by a tidal wave of opposition. He was declared a public enemy by the Senate and hunted like a fugitive by his own guards. As they closed in on him, Nero slit his throat with the help of a loyal slave. His last words were, "What an artist dies in me."
Nero died like the grandiloquent actor he always wanted to be, a kind of tragic actor upon a tragic stage. So his final words really do complete a picture of somebody who saw themselves not as an emperor, but as a star.
After Nero's death, the Romans sought to bury any memory of him and his oppressive reign. By 104 AD, his golden house was filled in and covered with dirt and rubble. It would form the foundation of a bath complex built above it by the Emperor Trajan. For the next 1,300 years, it lay buried and forgotten beneath a changing city. Then in the 1500s, a sinkhole led explorers back into the belly of the ancient beast. Inside, Renaissance artists drew inspiration from its bizarre frescoes.
The very word grotesque that we use today is actually an artistic term to describe these strange creatures that they saw down there that were part human, part beast, part architecture, part decoration.
The Domus Aurea is an enduring testament to Nero's chilling reign, one marred by madness, mass murder, and extreme self-indulgence. When that reign ended, the Roman Empire faced an uncertain future. Every emperor from Julius Caesar through Nero had been a descendant of a single bloodline. Now, for the first time, rule of the empire was left up for grabs.
No one was sure really what was going to happen next, except that it was going to be bloody and it wasn't going to be very good until it was over.
69 AD, Emperor Nero lays dead, killed by his own hand. For the first time since the murder of Julius Caesar, Rome is left without an heir to the throne. A power struggle erupts between the empire's top generals, who turn their armies on each other in a bloody bid for power. The ultimate victor is Vespasian, a simple, straight-talking general who had commanded Rome's legions in the volatile Jewish outpost of Judea. He is not of royal blood, and he is nothing like his tyrannical predecessor.
Vespasian was the anti-Nero. He was as different from Nero as one could possibly get. He had come up through the ranks, and he was a practical, kind of hard-bitten man who was averse to pretension and proud of it. Vespasian's the kind of guy that would much rather watch a football game than an opera.
Unlike Nero, who exploited the skills of his engineers for his own colossal vanity projects, Vespasian would put Rome's greatest architectural minds to work for the people. He would start by draining the massive lake that Nero had built on his palace grounds. On that site would rise Rome's most famous engineering marvel, a place where all the chaos that had consumed the city could be channeled. It would be called the Flavian Amphitheater, though we know it as the Colosseum.
So the statement that Vespasian made was, I am taking a space which is only for the private use of a bad emperor, and now I'm transforming that area into a public space which will be then used for the enjoyment of all the people of Rome. So that was a very bold piece of propaganda.
Gladiators had been spilling blood in the name of entertainment for centuries. But the people of Rome were hungry for bigger, bolder spectacles. The Colosseum would give the gladiators a permanent, state-of-the-art killing field, and the games would take on a level of carnage never before seen in the empire's history.
But this was the big venue. This was the Superdome. The entertainment came to you. Everything from animals from the farthest corners of the known world to captives from faraway lands could be brought to your central location, to your favorite box seat, and right in the center of the city.
Construction on the Colosseum began in 72 AD. It was financed by the sale of precious relics taken from the Jewish temple during Vespasian's sacking of Jerusalem. 12,000 Jewish captives were brought back from that campaign to build the amphitheater.
They would have worked under tremendously harsh conditions and been worked long and hard and to the end.
They poured more than 6,000 tons of concrete and hauled huge travertine building blocks to the site from a quarry 20 miles away.
As the building progressed up higher, they would use less of the strong, expensive and heavy limestone and more of the cheaper ingredients, which were lighter in weight. The Romans had quite sophisticated wooden cranes and devices for lifting stones, and they would be able to do that quite easily from the ground and up to great heights.
In just 8 years, the imposing structure grew to 160 feet tall, dwarfing all that surrounded it.
It's the tallest ancient Roman structure ever built. This is the amphitheater of the capital. So what was Rome? Rome was a city that was so much larger than any other city. It was so much richer. So that came to symbolize the power, the engineering, the wealth of ancient Rome.
Roman amphitheaters were constructed from a surprisingly simple framework, incorporating 2 Greek theaters back to back to form one 360-degree theater in the round. The Colosseum set a new standard for Roman amphitheater design. It contained an intricate network of corridors and staircases that could shuffle 70,000 Romans in and out in record time. As with stadiums today, everyone who entered the Colosseum had a ticket corresponding to the number above one of the entry gates. The complex was designed not only to control the crowds, but to keep them comfortable. It had 110 drinking fountains and 2 restrooms, large